Hi, Roger.
Hi, Henrik. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Calling in from London. Where are you in the world?
Netherlands, so not far away.
Not far away. How has your day been so far?
A bit hectic, full of work,
Hmm.
obviously, but I can't complain.
Can't complain. No, that's we just said before we went live. Today is this is a safe zone for us. So here we can relax and we can talk about things that we're both very passionate about, which I think is going to be interesting today. We're going to cover several things. Of course, we're going to know and learn more about your experience in IT as well, and how it all started as a developer, now into enterprise architecture, and also an author of a book, a field guide to digital transformation, which I think is going to be great. We're going to kind of jump into what digital transformation actually is and try to go away from the buzzwords and actually focus on some concrete things of what is happening in organizations. And for the ones that haven't watched Behind the Future, my name is Henrik. So I've been fortunate to be able to do several of these episodes now. I think this is the 12th episode, which I think is great. And today I'm speaking to Roger, and you have many years of experience within both from, as you mentioned yourself, started as a developer, solution architecture into enterprise architecture, and an independent consultant, and have been in a part of many digital transformation initiatives, both on the strategic and operational scale. So yeah, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great to be here.
and it's good to be here as well. And I also know that you have a very high tech camera today. So if everyone's watching, if you suddenly see the camera just transitioning into Roger's kitchen and his dog, it's just because the dog is making a lot of noise in the background. So I will try to keep you focused and in center.
Yes.
But to start with, right? I know that digital transformation, and we talk more and more about the technologies, right, of enabling organizations to change. But something that I'm very passionate about is the people behind organizations, people that are actually driving these initiatives. So the typical or the first question that I always like to ask is how it all started, right? What were some of your ambitions when you were growing up, and what was some of the things that you dreamt about, right, before you went into the adult career and the adult life. So
Yes.
how did it all start?
Yeah, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, if you will. I was a so-called interface developer in a telco, Java web application designer, and my life was code, 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 code. Leave me alone. I'm coding. As you can see, I'm not the long ponytail type of guy in the basement, but still, code was my life. And yeah, there were a few role models, if you will, that got me out of the coding spirit. One person, and I'd like to call them by name because they did so much good for me. One is Jan Bos, a can-do and respectful coach and leader. And he supported me to make my own choices, supporting me in my role as a developer at the time, and opening up my eyes about coding not being about the code and the syntax and all that kind of stuff, but being about the effect you can sort for users. So I guess Jan knew exactly how to get me a step further. And then the other guy was Michel Lenoir. He trusted this shy and introvert and insecure IT architect, and by putting faith in him, he helped me become much more secure and confident. And that made me transition into more complex assignments and becoming a go-to resource for integration. And he also prepared me for becoming a technical architect, and then solution architect, and then today's role, which is enterprise architect. And yeah, personally, I'm an introvert, so I have learned some of the fears that come with the territory. And a few years that was because of Michel and Jan. And a few years ago, I invited Michel over for coffee and thanked him for how he handled me, if you will, and told him
Mm.
what he really meant to me. And he asked me why I actually was really there, because initially he didn't believe that was the reason I came over. But I think we can't thank the people enough to that helped us forward. Unfortunately, I lost touch with Jan. I would have gladly have such a thank you coffee with him as well. But yeah, that's life, I guess.
Yeah.
And the last person, I guess, is Thomas Earl. We will be discussing Thomas later on as well, which is a Canadian business owner and best-selling author of a great deal of books on service orientation and cloud and digital transformation and other topics. And he may or may not be aware of this, but he was the one I met in 2008, and he made me see that it's not hard to turn your knowledge into a business, as long as you have
Mm.
things like vision and knowledge and things that if you bring substance to the table and you dare to take a leap, then you should be good to start a business. So he triggered me to start my own company in 2011, and he was also the one to get me started on the book we discussed today.
Mhm.
And I wrote this together.
Yeah. The first thing that you're mentioning there as well is, and this is something I'm very interested in as well, is typically kind of a lot of the organizations that I also work with, that kind of very many of them are kind of IT leaders, and they transition from, they started maybe their career as well as a developer, and then they transition into different roles in architecture, and then at some point also some of them transition into management roles, or some of them focus more on strategic enterprise architecture. But one of the things that you're mentioning there, which I think is extremely fascinating as well, right, is the typical persona in IT. Very often they seem to be very introverted, right? So how has that been for you? Because I'm guessing there's a lot of people that are watching this also coming from a developer background, looking to transition into, for example, an enterprise architecture role, or in more into consultancy, where the human interaction, right, it's unavoidable. You need to interact with other people. So
Yes.
how has that been for you?
It was a challenging journey, and there was a lot of how do you call it, insecurity for me when I really started with consultancy and starting my own business, especially. Thankfully, I had this. I mean, I am employed. I was employed, and at the same time, I was an independent contractor, if you will. So I had two jobs, or a job on the side, which allowed me to build confidence in my daytime job, and then bring that forward into my own business. And that took some time, obviously. And the very first few times that I took a class or a consulting engagement, that was really scary. But I guess practice helps.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then one of the things as well, like you mentioned, that you also have to kind of have thank you coffees, right, for some of the people that you looked up to, and some of the people that helped you. I think very often as well, you see how important it is to have proper kind of role models in your career, because it really shapes the decisions that you're making, right? And I think it's very easy to forget how much influence leaders actually have on their teams and their employees, if you will, and how much it really shapes the direction and the decisions that they're making.
Yeah,
So I'm definitely taking a note of that, and going to invite some of the leaders that I've had myself, because it's very easy to forget about where you are today, right, and the journey that you've been on.
yeah.
So when you kind of started to transition into various roles in the architecture space as well, so what is something that made you very passionate about this, right? Because you started with code, and then you started to focus on the end result for the customer, for the colleagues, and the organization. So what is something that drives you and your passion as well within IT?
Um, in short, you could call this passion for results, but that's such a, I don't know, such a
Hmm.
meaningless statement these days.
Yeah.
That I did some business applications and some integrations as a developer, and then I quickly found out that when you do integration, um, you make things work, you make business processes work, you make customers happy, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, in the beginning, I was all about code and interfaces and syntax and all that kind of stuff, and that made me really happy. But then, in the end, I realized it didn't make me happy forever, and I got happier from other stuff. For example, making others happy.
Hmm.
So it's I started realizing that it's not about the code and not about the quality of the code, but it's more about which end result you can sort for the people who actually use your products and services. Um, and that's still a very big driver for me today, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. And then when you met Thomas Earl as well in regards to the field guide of digital transformation, so when did that idea pop up? When did that idea pop up for you?
Yeah, personally, I had already thought about writing a book on digital transformation or agile organizations, if you will, or
Hmm.
agile business transformation a few years ago. And I actually had already started writing, but for some reason it didn't really come together properly. So I stopped writing about a year before Thomas asked me, "Hey, I've got this idea. Would you like to do this together?" So I didn't even use the stuff that I wrote before. We started all over from scratch with a new layout, a new structure, and I
Yeah.
think the book became better because of that.
Hmm.
Because what was written before was written with other beliefs and other results or goals, etc. So
Yeah.
it's for the best that we did it like this.
So digital transformation as well. I'm going to ask you kind of what is that actually about? Kind of in one line. It's probably difficult to because it's so much, but yet right.
Yes.
But then the second question is also, and this is just of pure interest, but just how is it to write a book? Because if you look at the end result, right now you see 450 pages, something like that, that you have actually built and developed.
Mhm.
But where do you start? How is that thought process of actually getting something accelerated when you're writing a book?
Yeah, for me, I mean, there are so many ideas and so much content in my head, and making sense of that on paper is tricky, as I found out with my first attempt. What really did help, there are good things about this COVID period. What did help is the partial and full lockdowns that we had in the Netherlands, that really, unfortunately, took us away from our families and friends for a little while. But it also gave me an opportunity to spend more time on this book. So I had a brief period of time, 3, 4 months, that I could focus on this. Um, Working together with Thomas and really get forward. And because of the progress that we made, because there was so much result in such a fairly short time, I think it made it worthwhile. Um, uh, to be honest, writing a book in the end towards the deadlines, it's never fun, or at least I assume it's never fun. It wasn't fun for me at the end because at the end, when the deadline arrives, things must be finished, and then you're always thinking like, did I forget something here? What are the open ends? What are the mistakes that we made? And all that kind of stuff. It
Yeah,
goes through your head, but I mean, we
yeah.
managed.
You managed, and I think I've read the book as well, and I think it's a great book. And we're going to get more information at the end of the interview as well. But I could highly recommend having a look at it because it's a great way of also understanding how IT is actually realizing the business, but then also for IT to communicate this to the business side and really create that bridge between the business side and the IT side, which is more and more intervened than it's ever been before. And then of course the question is, what is actually digital transformation? If you were to describe that in one sentence, how would you do that?
Yeah, I got the same question on LinkedIn a little while ago. Can you describe digital transformation in one line? And I found out that it's virtually impossible to do that. So what I said is, and I'll probably miss a few keywords here or there, so I'm open to suggestions from others as well, is that it's a type of business transformation which is required for a realigned or a new business strategy geared towards business adaptability and customer centricity, supported by technology enablers. And when I've made that statement, and yes, I've probably not nailed it. It is also important to understand that it's not a single one of these: technology transformation, business process improvement, application rationalization, cloud migration, cultural change. It's not any single one of those.
Mm.
I think that's also valuable to make as an additional statement with that single line.
Yep. And what are some of the common? Of course, it's in the title here as well, right? It's kind of the digital transformation in itself, and then also look at some of the common business drivers, and especially through the pandemic as well. And now, if you look at the macro changes as well in the society, so what are some of the drivers that makes it more important than ever before for organizations to actually get started on change and also make that what can I say, kind of a continuous journey, right? Because it never ends. It's something, a lot of organizations, they go from a project driven organization towards more of a capability, which basically always enforcing that we have the right IT stack to support our business ambitions. But what are some of the common drivers that we're seeing?
Yeah, so there are of course business and technology drivers, and I appreciate that we will not be elaborating much about the drivers for digital transformation, but still we have to assume that there must be some business or technology drivers that have led to new goals and ultimately a decision around how digital transformation as a means can help achieve those goals.
Mhm.
So examples of technology drivers could be a sudden increase in available digital data and technology to analyze and use results, or the need to centralize scalable and resilient IT resources. And examples of business drivers could, for example, be changing market conditions or cold customer relationships that need to be warmed up, or the inability to make the right decisions for growth, sustainability, or other goals.
Mhm. Yeah,
I think those are, in short,
yeah.
some drivers.
And especially a lot of the organizations that I've been working with as well, there's much more and more focus on kind of automation and efficiency, right? Understanding where they have bottlenecks as well, and how can we do the same? A typical question, right, within IT is how can we do the same the next year, but with less money? But there's also another question that typically pops up more and more is how can we become more efficient at what we work, and how can we make the customer experience much better? What have been some of the things that you have seen just in your book as well? Some of the things that you would highlight as well in regards to some of the benefits of actually driving this.
Yeah, there is a lot of benefits and goals that are relevant. Um, so let's see, traditional many organizations are structured around business silos. For example, they could be product oriented. It's common in banking anyway, for example, where mortgages and payments will be different products and different organizational units. And one of the goals could be that business alignment is key in support of improving the customer relationship. And I need to clear out, I think that we're not discussing business and IT alignment. We're talking about business alignment here. So it's a business challenge. And in
Mm-hmm.
such situations, instead of working independently, customers should feel and experience a better relationship with, which may not be achievable when they constantly have to deal with separate siloed experiences just because of the way the organization is structured. So one way of overcoming this is by truly restructuring the organization in such a way to facilitate more cooperation and convergence to centralized business processes instead of having multiple single purpose siloed business processes. And for people who have heard of Conway's Law, understand that how a business is structured very much influences the way how people in the organization communicate and relate, and that influences obviously cooperation. So it
Yeah.
may be good to restructure in such a way that we avoid business structures leading to unnatural segregation of people when viewed from customer point of view. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
a new structure that needs to facilitate cross-departmental cross-departmental cooperation, apologies, tongue breaker there, or even better group-related activities. And that should
Yep.
lead to cultural challenges though, which I believe which we'll be also discussing today.
Yep. And especially like we have, for example, one of the insurance providers that we've been working with for the last couple of months. And the reason why I wanted to mention this as well is because the example that you're saying there is that if you look across their different kind of business units and different kind of services that they're offering as well to their customers, they see that the customer journey is completely different, right? So some of those services are actually quite efficient. There's frictionless. It's very easy for the customer to get what he or she wants. But then in other parts of the organization, it's within the same kind of limited organization as well. They have a complete different ways of experiencing the products and the services that the company is providing. And if you look at that lens, like, and of course we can go into the details of this as well, but where should organizations start by mapping out those customer journeys, right? Because it's so important to understand how IT is supporting those services that they're delivering. So how should organizations go about that?
Yeah, it's becoming customer oriented is always it starts with putting the customer first and placing yourself in the position of the customer, I guess. And when you look from customer point of view towards the organization and the business processes, how would we like to perceive the customer journeys that are relevant to those customers? So if you know who your customer is and what they want, what their goals are, what they want to achieve, then you can think about structuring your business processes in such a way that whatever channel they use or in which order, where they start, where they finish, whatever interaction mode the customer would like to prefer, they can have it if um, they have a certain preference.
Yeah.
So it's not about having siloed business processes for a channel or for a product, but it's about having business processes that are seamless, if you will, seamless across all the channels for all the products, and the customer feels like it's one big natural engagement with an organization, with the company.
Yeah. And then kind of this challenge though is and we're seeing this at Ardoq as well, right? When an organization is growing, it's that balance between the customer interaction and really listening to the customer of the challenges that the customers experience, and of course the problems that we can help them solve, how they experience the platform that we're delivering, and they kind of the customer experience. But then you mentioned something at the start, which is actually really fascinating, right? Is that when you started out as a developer, you at the start you focus on the code, right? To build the perfect code and to really make sure that you have a clean technology stack. But how do you get the ones that are actually building the product to also see what's going on the business, and basically how do you create that link? to make sure that what you're developing is actually aligned with what the customer is experiencing or is requesting?
Yeah, that's really tough, I
Yeah.
guess. uh,
Tough question.
yes. Um, how to create the link is by making people cooperate. That means reduce the distance between business and IT, preferably by positioning teams in a sort of a team kind of fashion. You know, the A team, 90s series,
Yeah.
where there are multidisciplinary people that have their expertise work together to get a better result. Where we bring business and IT people together. This is also what DevOps is about, right?
Yeah.
When somebody goes after DevOps, yes, it's about automation and predictability, but it's also about business and IT alignment, about working together and making sure that the people who actually deliver um, yeah, solutions, automations, that they also understand what they do it for.
Hmm. And then on a separate note there as well, where do you see the where do you see the enterprise architect role fit into that today in digital transformation initiatives? Kind of how do you see the enterprise architect play into that part as well?
Um, yeah, enterprise architecture is a discipline that it depends who you ask what they how they feel about it.
Mm.
It's somewhere between ivory tower and they missed how it feels in the trenches, if you will.
Mm.
And so, an enterprise architect for me is a person who understands the mission and vision of an organization and understands along a number of concerns how to solve those strategic goals. And that includes business, and it includes IT, and it includes infrastructure, and it includes everything. So, for me, an enterprise architect is a person who understands business and IT and can make them seamlessly work together and facilitate or drive the change that is necessary to realize that strategy that the organization
Mm.
chose.
Yeah.
Maybe they can even support by making a strategy that fits with mission and vision.
Yeah. I totally agree with that because that's what I've seen as well. Often the most kind of, especially within, if you look at it from kind of digital transformation initiatives or kind of projects that have been running in an organization that is connected to their strategy and objectives as well. I typically feel like the enterprise architect can kind of be the glue, right? That really make sure that what we are trying to accomplish as an organization and our strategy, if that is a go-to cloud strategy, if that's developing a microservices environment, if it's kind of mergers and acquisitions, is that they can communicate that business understanding to something that IT can action upon, and that can actually make a kind of something that they can address relatively quickly as well.
Mhm.
Um, then of course we have the other side here, right? We know that there's a lot of benefits, and also now it's not just benefits anymore, but it's also the, it's the must way of changing, right? You need to do this, or someone said that if you stand still, you're gonna get shot. You're gonna lose your traction. So if we look at the other side of the table here, so what are some of the risks? What are the things that you have been seeing as well when you created the book together with Thomas, and what can happen if we don't create this culture for change in organizations?
Yeah. So I appreciate that we're not going through all the benefits that we wrote in the book. I
Mm.
think it's very good that we also talk about common risks and challenges, and there are a number. It's poor data quality and data bias. For one, we've got a few. So we talked about these benefits, but we can't stay away from these challenges. It goes without saying that a digital organization has a lot of data to work with, and more data becomes available, and the more trouble arises organizing and making sense of that data. So ideally, an organization also becomes more data driven over time, meaning that they react to data when it happens, if you will. So specifically, when data is used for key strategic decisions, it can become very powerful and at the same time very risky, because
Mm.
data quality is a make or break factor for becoming data driven and making the right strategic decisions. And the funny thing is, or the bad thing is, if we make poor decisions, we may lead the organization into a problematic situation. So we better pay attention to that data quality.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's not just data quality, it's also completeness and accuracy and objective orientation of the data. And do we fail here? Then we make ineffective decisions, biased decisions, we may miss opportunities. There are many things that go wrong. And do we get them right? And that's quite hard. Then we may have a chance to actually make the difference with a solid plan and data intelligence, and maybe even make the difference in the marketplace, staying
Yeah.
relevant, becoming relevant, creating new marketplaces where you're the first mover, and then you get the big first mover advantage, etc.
Yeah.
And also, there is an increased quality of vulnerable digital data. Organizations that undergo digital transformation typically introduce significantly larger volumes, and the more data an organization has, the harder it gets to manage and protect it. And organizations may accidentally leak information into the outside world because of adversaries that try and get their hands on it, or because there's more data, the attack surface also increases. So having solid security measures in place and policies and what can and cannot be done is key here. And
Mhm.
of course, external adversaries are just one threat. We also need to look inside. Mistakes
Mhm.
can delete or alter data. Data could be extracted by ill-behaving employees and sold it to other entities.
Mhm.
Or we may even see data getting manipulated, affecting the data-driven strategic decisions that we saw before. So we see how the governance and protection of data is quite essential then.
Yeah.
And we can use cybersecurity measures to prevent access or to detect unauthorized access.
Mhm.
Could have systems in place that detect certain unexpected patterns in our data or data transport, or well, in the end, it's key to prevent, but also detect malicious activity, and proper actions can be taken.
Yeah. I had one question there. I just wanted to say as well that just as you have a very high tech camera, I'm also sitting in a room with a very high tech light. So it didn't measure any movement for me. So I just got to turn on the light again. 2 seconds. let's try this again. Thanks for everyone watching as well, looking at how Henrik and Roger uses technology when we're on live. I think that's great. But I say that this is, if you look at all the, of course, the benefits and the opportunities that organizations can obtain today as well. But if you look at this list as well that you're presenting, right, of all the risks, of all the challenges, there seems to be an endless kind of a fall as well if organizations are not on top of this. So if you look at it from a management perspective, especially looking at it from a CISO, you look at it from a CIO and a CTO, you have even a CFO and a chief operating officer as well. So kind of how can these, and this is more on a more hypothetical question, but how can these leaders also communicate the urgency of this to their organizations, of why this is so important, and how like to create that culture?
Yeah, it's making people understand. The environment around us, it changes. Regulations change, markets change, competitors change. They come and they go, and sometimes somebody is more successful with one approach than the other one. So it affects the way an organization needs to behave. It needs to respond. So I think if you can't explain properly that this is the situation, I don't know. This line of business is making less money. We need to find a new line of business that makes more money. So the next, I don't know, 6 months to 12 months, we are focusing on creating new products and services that next year we can put into market. So we need people with product expertise and marketing expertise, etc., with the right focus to make this happen. And this is the reason why. If we don't do it, we go out of business, or whatever the reason is. There is always an external driver, right? Or typically an external driver. So make people understand is just key. And once that
Mm-hmm.
understanding is in place, it's easier to have such transformations.
Yeah. And I know one of the books that you read as well, if you look at kind of wrapping up with some key takeaways here as well, is kind of Designing Organizations by Naomi Stanford. I tried to say
Yes.
that. I'm Norwegian, so I get away with it with a poor accent. But you mentioned that her book as well, Designing Organizations. Is
Yeah.
how is that played into this?
Um, well, it's before we prepared, you asked me what are the books that sort of stood out for you in the recent times, and there are three, I guess. And Designing Organizations by Naomi Stanford is one of them. She's a very inspirational lady, so knowledgeable, with a wealth of experience and open to other people's opinions, which is inspirational in itself. So many viewpoints that are there in the book on organizational design and a view on enterprise architecture for me from a different point of view, because I mean I come from IT and organization and business. See, there I'm going.
Yeah.
uh, so Looking at enterprise architecture from an organizational point of view by enterprise designers, for people by people who are actually who have experience with enterprise design, that is so essential to knowledge in the area of business architecture for an enterprise architect. If it's part of the job, you better understand it. And so Naomi, with her book, she really helps me better understand what it means to design organizations, and it fills gaps where EAs, enterprise architects originating from IT, usually lack an expertise.
That's
Yeah.
great. I would, yeah, we're going to share these books as well after in the, both in the event page and on the Ardoq page as well. Because and you mentioned something here, right? For enterprise architects as well, typically coming from the IT side, storytelling, right? It's so important to communicate that to the business, and
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that this book also helps them put the technical understanding in a more business lens, if you will.
I hope so. I haven't fully
Yeah,
finished it yet, so maybe it's still in there. But
we'll
yes,
find out. Yeah.
yes. But storytelling is definitely an instrument that really helps very much with getting people to understand and getting emotional about the same and or getting the same passion about a certain topic or a certain transformation. Now, with digital transformation, it's always a long breath kind of thing. Don't hold your breath until it's over. Maybe it's
Hmm.
never over. So
Yeah.
um, uh, having an
Exactly.
inspirational approach like storytelling really helps them.
Yeah. And then are there, of course, we're going to get to your own book as well, which of course we're gonna highlight some of that. But has there been any other books as well that you have read, or any other resources that you would recommend to the people that are watching?
Yeah, there are two actually. One of them I read about 25 years ago, a long time ago, as a programmer. It was it was called The Pragmatic Programmer by Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas, and that book's helped programmers focus on craftsmanship rather than code and syntax. So that was a game changer for me, related to what we discussed earlier when we opened the call today. In the book, it helps with learning the benefits of really understanding requirements, becoming more predictable, and producing reliable and resilient code rather than syntactically correct code, and taking responsibility and stop making excuses. And then there was another book. It's called The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim,
Yep.
which in a playful way helps understanding how to operate, so change and run an organization. You could say it's a business or an IT management book disguised as a novel. You can read it in a few days. Even the topic is not, if it's not your cup of tea, I still find it to be a great read.
Yep. I would actually recommend that as well. We read that in our organization across the entire company some years ago, where basically both IT and business had to read that book, and I would, yeah, I can highly recommend that as well.
Yeah.
We actually have a comment here from one of the viewers as well, Sharon Jones. She's kind of looking at it from making people understand. My experience is that people often do understand from their experiences. Rather, it's the leaders that create the barriers, territories and power relations, or a techno-rational dominant culture.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the big challenges is culture. I mean, getting the right people on board is not the same as getting the right people having the same mindset. So maybe their skills and their expertise they're excellent, but their cultural background is really different, and they have different goals in mind. So getting people aligned to the same set of goals, understanding mission and vision, etc., but also changing cultural approach or changing the cultural culture is one of the key elements, I guess, of a digital transformation. I know we didn't deep dive into those yet or
Yeah,
at all during this call, but um, people and culture can make or break a digital transformation, regardless of what your goals are, and
yeah.
regardless of which technology you use or how fancy you make your process. Doesn't really matter. People and people culture is key.
This is going to be a tough question before we wrap up. But how do you create good culture? Like, how do you create? Because very often, right, we know about all the technologies that organizations can be using, the best frameworks and the best kind of processes that they can put in motion and so forth. But you said this exactly, and I totally agree. Like, people can make or break cultures, and it can move quite quickly if you have the wrong people in the wrong positions as well, right? So how do you build that culture of kind of top performers and someone that are actually willing and are seeking to change?
Oh, and you're asking me.
that's a that's a tough question. I don't have the answer to
Yes.
it.
No, I probably don't have a full or a satisfying answer, but it's all about making people feel included or feel inclusive, regardless of their background. I'm not talking about, I don't know, skin color or the country where they come from, but just
Mhm.
feeling heard, feeling understood, and feeling like their voice matters.
Yeah.
I think
I,
that's the starting point, I guess.
yeah. No, I think that's a very good answer. If you have any thoughts on this, the people that are watching yourself, feel free to write it in the comment section. I'm always looking to learn how people are perceiving this in their organizations, and I think this is something that is the easiest thing to understand, that it is important, but it's probably the most difficult thing to get in place in real life and actually make that a central part of how organizations are continuously improving. Um, so the last thing then is around, of course, the field guide to digital transformation. What can people expect now? They had kind of a quick taste of some of the things that you are covering in the book as well. But what are some of the things that the viewers can expect if they also look to start reading that book? How would you describe that?
um, So we understood that digital transformation, it doesn't have a clear definition. Maybe we're getting to a clear definition as we progress, and it may take some time still. But what we did is we tried explaining in the first half of the book what is digital transformation and what is it for, because it's a means, it's not a goal. Um, a digital transformation is always a consequence of something else, and if there is no business driver or whatever that signifies the need for a digital transformation, don't even start. Um, so if those drivers are not there, I think it would be good to understand from the. I have to rephrase. If you read the book, you'll find out that those drivers are key, and without those drivers, there is no point. We split the book in two halves. One half is more for executives, senior executives, enterprise architects, etc., just to understand what it is, what the benefits are, goals, challenges, any characteristic of a digital transformation. And then the second part is how technology can be used to support or facilitate the digital transformation. So the first half, there will not be a lot of technology in there. Maybe some statements about type of technology, but definitely not technical details. And then later on, the second half, we have those technical details, if you will, not very far-fetched technical details, but just enough so people can understand how the technology fits with the requirements of a certain part of the digital transformation. And then lastly, we've got a use case or a case study where an organization undergoes a digital transformation. They want to reach certain things, and we show an example of how that could work.
Great, greatly summarized as well, and we will make sure that we share the links to these resources in the event page after today's episode. As always, a big thank you to everyone that has tuned in today. If you have any follow up questions, feel free to reach out to Roger or myself on LinkedIn. Always happy to connect. And then Roger, a big thank you to you as well for taking the time to join today. I hope it was fun for you, even though we had some high tech cameras and some high tech lighting that really put ourselves to the test today. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun. It's a pity that these calls are so short.
Exactly, and I'm pretty confident that this is not going to be our last conversation, and hopefully we could record another one in the near future.
I'd look forward to that.
Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Bye, Roger.
Bye bye.